Imagine being so broke that food feels optional, so desperate that survival costs you pieces of yourself. Now imagine that same person building one of the most powerful brands on earth. This isn't a fantasy. This is the real story of a boy who grew up with nothing and refused to let that be his ending. Before we begin, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. These real-life struggle stories exist to remind you you're not alone and your story isn't over yet. There's hardly a single person on this planet who hasn't heard of Starbucks, a global symbol, a lifestyle brand, a $100 billion empire. But long before the green logo, before the success, before the applause, there was a small, cramped, one-bedroom apartment in public housing. And inside it lived a boy named Howard Schultz. Howard didn't grow up surrounded by opportunity. He grew up surrounded by anxiety. His family lived paycheck to paycheck, always one bad day away from disaster. His father, an Army veteran, worked low-paying jobs his entire life, never secure, never protected. No health insurance, no savings, no safety net. Howard learned early what fear sounded like. It sounded like hushed conversations late at night. It looked like unopened bills stacked on the kitchen table. It felt like shame, quiet, heavy and constant. Then one winter day, everything collapsed. Howard was just 7 years old when his father slipped on ice while delivering diapers and shattered his leg. No job, no income, no compensation, just pain and silence. Howard remembers his father lying on the couch, broken, defeated, staring at the ceiling like life had finally beaten him. That image burned itself into Howard's mind. In that moment, he learned something terrifying. Hard work didn't always protect you, and poverty didn't care how good you were. Some nights, Howard would escape the noise by sitting alone on the staircase of their building, listening to distant city sounds, dreaming quietly because dreaming too loud felt dangerous. He didn't know how, he didn't know when, but somewhere deep inside, a promise was forming. This would not be his forever. Howard didn't have the luxury of a carefree childhood. While other kids worried about homework or weekend plans, he worried about things children shouldn't even understand yet: money, stability, and whether his family would be okay. Poverty wasn't loud. It was quiet. It lived in the pauses between conversations, in the way his parents avoided eye contact when bills arrived, in the way his mother tried to stretch meals so no one would notice there wasn't enough food. Howard watched everything. After his father lost his job, the house felt smaller, heavier. There was a constant tension in the air, like everyone was holding their breath, afraid that one wrong move would make everything collapse again. His father wasn't a bad man. He was tired. Years of low-paying jobs had worn him down, and that injury took away the last bit of dignity he felt he had. Howard would see him sitting silently, staring into nothing, and think, is this what life does to people? At school, Howard learned another lesson early: comparison. Other kids talked about vacations, new shoes, and college plans like they were guaranteed. For Howard, nothing was guaranteed. Every opportunity felt fragile, temporary, easy to lose. He felt invisible, and sometimes, worse, judged. Teachers praised potential, but potential didn't pay rent. Friends dreamed freely, but Howard measured every dream against reality. He wanted more, but wanting felt risky. Wanting too much could lead to disappointment. Still, something inside him refused to settle. In high school, football became an escape. On the field, poverty didn't matter. Fear didn't matter. Only discipline, pain, and effort. He pushed himself harder than everyone else, not because he loved the sport, but because it was a way out. That effort earned him an athletic scholarship to college. When the letter arrived, it should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like pressure. College wasn't freedom, it was a test. A chance he couldn't afford to waste. Howard chose to study communications, not sports. People questioned him. Why not stick to what's safe? Why take risks when you already got lucky? Lucky. The word bothered him. He knew how many nights his family went to bed worried. How many sacrifices had been made quietly. This wasn't luck. It was survival mixed with effort. College life was brutal. Howard worked multiple jobs, juggling classes with exhaustion. Some days, hunger followed him like a shadow. Bills stacked up again, just like at home. There were moments Late at night, when he questioned everything. Am I foolish for dreaming bigger than my situation? Am I repeating the same cycle? But every time doubt whispered, another thought answered back. I've seen what happens when you accept less. I refuse to end up there. He didn't know the path yet. He didn't know the destination. All he knew was this. Failure scared him, but staying trapped scared him more. And that fear was slowly shaping him into someone different. By the time Howard settled into college life, survival had become routine. Not easy, just familiar. Every morning began with calculations. How much money was left? Which bill could wait? Which meal could be skipped? While other students talked about parties and future careers, Howard learned how to stretch a dollar until it almost disappeared. He wore the same clothes longer than he should have. He avoided social events, not because he didn't want friends, but because he couldn't afford to pretend. Loneliness crept in quietly. There were nights when the campus felt alive with laughter, music, and freedom. Howard would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to his stomach growl, wondering how something as simple as being born into the wrong situation could shape every decision you make. He worked constantly. Any job he could find, anything legal, exhausting, and necessary. Still, it wasn't enough. One afternoon, desperation crossed a line he never thought he would approach. Standing in a sterile room, surrounded by white walls and the smell of disinfectant, Howard made a choice he never spoke about openly. He sold his blood, not for ambition, not for pride, just to eat. As the needle went in, he stared at the ceiling, embarrassed, not because anyone judged him, but because this wasn't the life he imagined for himself. His body felt weak afterward, but his mind was louder than ever. Is this really what it takes just to survive? How far down can life push someone before they disappear? That experience stayed with him. It hardened something inside him, but it also clarified something important. Poverty wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. After graduating, Howard didn't feel victorious. He felt uncertain. There was no safety net waiting, no guaranteed job, just a degree and a quiet fear that all the struggle might still not be enough. His first real job took him to a ski lodge. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't permanent, but it paid the bills. Later, he became a salesman, traveling, pitching products, smiling through rejection. Each no felt familiar. He'd grown up with it, lived with it, learned to absorb it without breaking. Still, something felt missing. Howard wasn't afraid of work. He was afraid of wasting his life. During one sales trip, he encountered a small company selling high-quality coffee beans, Starbucks. At the time, it wasn't famous. It wasn't trendy. Just 3 owners with a passion for coffee. But to Howard, something about it felt different. It wasn't just the product. It was the care, the pride, the intention behind it. For the first time in a long time, curiosity replaced fear. He started asking questions, visiting stores, watching customers, and deep down, a thought began forming. Quiet. Howard couldn't stop thinking about Starbucks. It didn't make sense at first. It was just coffee beans. No drinks. No seating. No music. And yet, something about the place stayed with him long after he walked out the door. Maybe it was the smell, rich, grounding warm. Or maybe it was the way the employees handled the product, like it mattered. Like it had a story. Howard saw something others didn't. While traveling as a salesman, he kept returning to Starbucks stores, watching customers, listening to conversations, studying the rhythm of the business. He wasn't just observing, he was imagining. What if this was more than a transaction? What if it could be an experience? The idea wouldn't leave him alone. Eventually, he found the courage to reach out to the owners. 3 men. Smart. Practical. Focused on selling quality beans, not dreams. Howard was young. 29. No money. No power. No reputation. Just conviction. The first meeting didn't go well. He spoke too fast, too passionately, like someone afraid of being cut off. He talked about growth, culture, and possibility. They listened politely, but cautiously. When the meeting ended, Howard walked out unsure if he had helped his case or ruined it. But he didn't stop. For an entire year, Howard kept pushing. Emails, calls, meetings. Each time refining his message, controlling his nerves, hiding his desperation. He needed this. Not just as a job, but as purpose. Finally, after 12 long months, Starbucks hired him. It felt like validation, like a door opening after years of knocking in silence. But the relief didn't last. Howard quickly realized something painful. He was an outsider. The ideas in his head didn't match the vision of the company. Then came the trip to Italy. That journey changed everything. Howard walked into an Italian coffee bar and froze. People weren't rushing. They were talking, laughing, connecting. The barista knew customers by name. Coffee wasn't rushed, it was respected. It hit him all at once. This wasn't just about caffeine. This was about community. Howard felt electricity in his chest. This was the missing piece. He returned to the U.S. energized, almost shaking with excitement, and shared everything with the Starbucks owners. He talked about espresso bars, conversation, atmosphere, a third place between home and work. They said no. Not once. Not gently. Repeatedly. Too risky. Not who we are. Stick to the beans. Each rejection felt personal. Howard tried to stay professional, but inside he was unraveling. He replayed conversations in his head late at night, wondering if he was naive, if his poverty-born hunger for more was blinding him. Who do you think you are to challenge people more experienced than you? The doubt crept back in, the same doubt he knew from childhood. But this time, it collided with something stronger. A memory. His father on the quitting Starbucks felt like stepping off a cliff. Howard didn't have a backup plan. No savings. No rich connections waiting to catch him. Just an idea, and the fear that if he ignored it, he'd regret it for the rest of his life. The day he walked away, his hands shook, not dramatically, quietly, the kind of fear that settles deep in your chest and stays there. People thought he was crazy. You're leaving a stable job? You're walking away from opportunity. Who do you think you are? Howard asked himself the same questions every night. He named his new company Il Giornale, inspired by the Italian coffee culture he couldn't forget. But passion didn't pay rent. Reality hit fast. Banks said no. Friends were cautious. Family worried. Howard spent days pitching and nights doubting. He carried rejection like a second skin, smiling during meetings, collapsing in silence afterward. Investor after investor listened, then declined. Some were polite. Others weren't. This won't work in America. People don't want that experience. Coffee is just coffee. Each rejection chipped away at his confidence. He kept a mental count without meaning to. 1 no. 10 no's. 50 no's. The number climbed until it became humiliating. 242 investors. 217 said no. Howard felt smaller with every meeting. His voice quieter. His posture heavier. Late at night, alone, he questioned everything. Am I repeating my father's story? Am I risking everything for nothing? The fear of becoming trapped battled the fear of failing publicly. Sometimes he imagined walking back to Starbucks, apologizing, asking for his job back. The thought brought both comfort and shame. But something stopped him. He remembered selling his blood, the hunger, the humiliation. If I survive that, he thought, I can survive rejection. Eventually, a few people believed. Not many. Just enough. The first Il Giornale store opened quietly. No headlines. No applause. Just long days, sleepless nights, and relentless pressure. Howard worked constantly, behind the counter, on the floor, anywhere he was needed. He watched customers carefully, their reactions, their habits. When someone stayed longer, talked more, smiled, he noticed. When someone didn't come back, he questioned why. Slowly, painfully, the vision began to take shape. Then life delivered one final twist. Starbucks, the company that had rejected his dream, began to struggle. Financial problems, leadership changes, uncertainty. When the opportunity came, it felt unreal. Howard had a choice. Watch from a distance, or step back. When Howard heard that Starbucks was in trouble, his first reaction wasn't excitement. It was disbelief. This was the company that had once felt untouchable to him. The place that had rejected his ideas, questioned his vision, and unknowingly pushed him to risk everything on his own. Now it was struggling, losing direction, bleeding financially, and searching for stability. For days, Howard wrestled with the idea. Buying Starbucks felt impossible, dangerous, almost irresponsible. He still wasn't rich. Il Journal was surviving, not thriving. Every dollar had a purpose. Every mistake carried weight. Late at night, Howard sat alone, staring at spreadsheets and handwritten notes, listening to the hum of the city outside. His mind raced with questions that wouldn't let him rest. What if this destroys everything I've built? What if I'm not ready? What if they were right about me all along? But another voice answered back, calmer, steadier. What if this is why you went through all of it? Howard remembered that Italian cafe. The laughter. The warmth. The sense of belonging. He remembered the staircase from his childhood, the quiet dreams whispered into the dark. This wasn't about revenge. It was about completion. He began negotiating, knowing full well that failure here would be public and brutal. Doubt surrounded him, from advisors, peers, even from people who wanted the best for him. You're overreaching. Stick to what you have. Don't risk everything. But Howard had lived his whole life on the edge of risk. Poverty had taught him that playing it safe didn't always keep you safe. When the deal finally went through, the weight of it hit him all at once. Howard Schultz became the owner, and soon the CEO of Starbucks. There was no celebration, no victory lap, just responsibility. The company was fragile. Employees were uncertain. The culture felt hollow. Howard could sense it the moment he walked through the stores. This was his chance, but also his test. He began changing things slowly, intentionally, introducing espresso drinks, creating spaces where people could sit, talk, and feel welcome, training employees not just to serve coffee but to care. Some resisted, some laughed, some predicted failure. Howard absorbed the criticism quietly. He had learned long ago that noise didn't define truth. The pressure was relentless. Every decision felt like it could collapse the company or save it. At night, exhaustion pressed down on him, but something new was there too. Purpose. For the first time, his struggle felt aligned with his vision. The pain, the hunger, the rejection, it all had direction now. Starbucks wasn't fixed yet, not even close. But beneath the uncertainty, something powerful was forming. And Howard knew. The hardest part wasn't behind him. It was just beginning. Becoming CEO didn't silence the fear, it amplified it. Every morning, Howard walked into Starbucks knowing one wrong decision could erase everything. This wasn't his small startup anymore. Thousands of employees depended on him. Families depended on him. And doubt followed him everywhere. Some executives questioned his background. Others whispered that he was too emotional, too idealistic, too inexperienced. Howard heard it all. In meetings, he stayed calm. Inside, his chest tightened. He remembered being the poor kid, always proving, always justifying his place. That feeling never really leaves you. It just changes shape. Starbucks needed money. Fast. Costs were high. Growth was risky. Investors wanted returns, not philosophy. Howard felt pulled in opposite directions, build a soul or build a balance sheet. Late nights became routine. He walked empty stores after closing, running his fingers along countertops, listening to the silence. He imagined them full, voices overlapping, cups clinking, warmth replacing emptiness. But imagination didn't erase reality. Some early expansions failed. Locations underperformed. Critics grew louder. Articles questioned his leadership. Employees worried about job security. Howard absorbed the stress quietly, carrying it home, lying awake as the clock ticked toward morning. What if I was wrong? What if my dream cost people their livelihoods? Then came resistance to one of his boldest decisions, employee healthcare. Advisors warned him. It's too expensive. Wall Street won't like it. Cut costs instead. Howard couldn't forget his father. Injured. Fired. Forgotten. That memory wasn't negotiable. He pushed forward anyway, offering healthcare to full and part-time employees. The risk was massive, the backlash immediate, but something unexpected happened. Employees stayed. They cared. They believed. Stores felt different. Energy changed. Customers noticed. It wasn't magic. It was trust. Growth was slow, painfully slow. Each small win came after setbacks, sleepless nights, and moments of pure exhaustion. Howard learned to lead under pressure, to make decisions while afraid, to stand alone when necessary. He learned that confidence isn't the absence of doubt, it's movement despite it. The boy who once sat on a staircase dreaming had become a man standing in uncertainty, still dreaming, but now responsible for turning vision into reality. The fear hadn't disappeared, but it no longer controlled him. And as Starbucks began to stabilize, Howard felt something unfamiliar rising beneath the exhaustion finally caught up to him. Not the kind you sleep off, but the kind that settles into your bones, the kind that makes even success feel heavy. Howard found himself sitting alone one night, long after the offices had emptied, lights dimmed, city noise muffled by glass and distance. For the first time in years, he stopped pushing. He let the silence speak. His body was tired, his mind was crowded, and his heart felt stretched thin between fear and responsibility. Starbucks was surviving, but survival wasn't the dream. Howard realized he'd been reacting for too long, fixing problems, plugging leaks, making decisions from urgency instead of intention. The same survival mode he'd lived in since childhood had followed him into leadership, and survival was no longer enough. He asked himself the hardest question of all. What kind of company am I truly trying to build? The answer scared him. He wasn't building stores. He wasn't building revenue. He was building belonging. That realization brought clarity and risk. If he committed fully to that vision, there would be no halfway measures. No playing safe. It would require patience, investment, and the courage to disappoint people who only cared about short-term results. Howard began preparing mentally, slowly, deliberately. He reviewed every store experience, every employee interaction, every customer moment. He accepted something deeply uncomfortable. Some growth would need to pause. Some profits would be delayed. Some critics would get louder. And there was no guarantee it would work. The fear returned, not as panic but as honesty. You could lose this. You could be wrong. You could fail publicly. But beneath that fear was something steadier. If you don't do this, you'll betray everything you believe in. Howard knew the cost of hesitation. He'd seen it on his father's face years ago. That quiet resignation. That acceptance of limits imposed by fear. He refused to repeat it. This wasn't a dramatic moment. No speeches. No applause. Just a man, alone, choosing alignment over comfort. He committed to a long-term strategy, investing in people, store culture, and experience, even when numbers didn't immediately reward it. He chose consistency over speed, meaning over ego. There was suspense in that choice because the outcome was unknowable. Every decision felt like stepping into fog. But for the first time, Howard felt light, not because the pressure was gone, but because the direction was finally clear. The boy who once dreamed on a staircase wasn't chasing escape anymore. He was building something that could outlive fear. And now, there was no turning back. Commitment turned into action, quiet, relentless action. There was no dramatic overnight shift. No sudden applause. Just long days filled with deliberate choices, each one reinforcing the vision Howard had finally committed to. He slowed expansion when others demanded speed. He invested in training when critics demanded cuts. He listened to employees, to customers, to the silence between numbers. Pressure followed every move. Wall Street questioned him. Analysts warned that emotion didn't belong in business. Every quarter felt like an exam. Every report card waiting to expose him as the wrong choice. Howard felt the weight constantly. There were mornings he woke up already tired, mind racing through problems before his feet hit the floor. He carried stress in his shoulders, tension in his jaw, but he kept showing up. Execution required sacrifice. He spent less time celebrating and more time correcting. When a store failed, he didn't hide from it. He walked in, spoke to employees, asked uncomfortable questions. Small wins appeared quietly. Customers stayed longer. Employees smiled more. Turnover dropped. These weren't headlines, but they were signals. Momentum built slowly, like pressure beneath the surface. Store by store, the experience became consistent. Familiar. Comforting. People began calling Starbucks their third place. Not home, not work, but somewhere in between. Exactly what Howard had seen years ago in Italy. Still, setbacks didn't stop. Some markets resisted. Some expansions misfired. Economic uncertainty threatened progress. Howard absorbed each blow, reminding himself that resilience wasn't dramatic, it was repetitive. It was choosing discipline when excitement faded, Late at night, he sometimes replayed the journey, the boy from public housing, the college student selling blood, the rejected visionary begging investors to believe. The distance between then and now felt unreal. But success didn't erase fear. It reframed it. Fear became a signal, not to stop, but to pay attention. And then something changed. Media tone softened. Numbers stabilized. Growth returned, this time healthier, rooted, intentional. Starbucks wasn't just surviving. It was becoming itself. Howard felt it one morning while watching a crowded store. Conversations overlapping. Baristas calling names. Laughter. Familiar faces. This was it. Not the money. Not the valuation. The proof that vision, when executed with patience and integrity, could shape reality. Success didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived quietly, measured in full cafes, familiar faces, and a sense of stability that no longer felt fragile. Starbucks grew, not just in size, but in identity. The company finally reflected what Howard had carried in his mind for years. A place of belonging. A place of dignity. A place where people mattered. Years passed. Stores multiplied across cities, countries, continents. What once felt impossible became routine, then historic. Starbucks crossed milestones Howard never allowed himself to fantasize about when he was younger. Over 30,000 stores worldwide, a valuation exceeding $100 billion. But the number that mattered most to him couldn't be measured. It was the distance between the boy who watched his father lie broken on a couch and the man who made sure millions of employees would never feel abandoned in the same way. Howard often reflected on the irony of it all. The poverty he once resented became his compass. The fear he tried to escape became his teacher. The rejection he endured became his training. He never forgot selling his blood to survive. He never forgot hunger. He never forgot shame. Those memories kept him grounded, kept him human. When asked about luck, Howard was always clear. In life, you can blame others or drown in self-pity, or you can take responsibility for yourself. What people call luck is often just seeing what others don't and acting on it. He didn't follow a perfect formula. He didn't wait for perfect conditions, because there are none. If he had waited to feel ready, Starbucks as we know it wouldn't exist. If he had listened to fear, his story would have ended on that staircase. Instead, he chose movement over comfort, responsibility over excuses, vision over approval. And that is the real message of his story. You don't need certainty to start. You don't need permission to dream. And you don't need to escape fear to move forward. A year from now, you may wish you had started today. So wherever you are, broke, doubting, tired, or invisible, remember this. Your beginnings do not disqualify you. Your struggle is not wasted, and your story is still being written. This has been a real-life journey of struggle, resilience, and vision, brought to you by Struggle Project Stories. If this story moved you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs hope today. And in the comments, tell us one thing you refuse to give up on. Because sometimes, refusing to break is how everything changes.